I think a lot of people are enjoying their coffee. If not, they should get some. It's afternoon, it's right after lunch. And we're going to try and wake you up a little bit. My name is Sumant Mandal. I'm a co-founder, managing partner of March Capital. We are a technology investment firm. We've been investing in, I've been doing this for more than 20 years, but the firm's been around for 10. And I have the privilege of being an investor in both of their companies and on the boards of these companies. So I think I'm always excited to hear from them on what's going on. Being a board member, I'm not always given privy to everything. So I'm hoping they'll share stuff with us. One of the suggestions here was to open it up to the audience for questions after we set up a little bit of the introductions. But to set that up, maybe what I'll do is starting with Umesh from the furthest from me, and then Amir, give you all a little insight into what they're doing, what inspired them to get started doing this, and then where they are in their journey, and we'll talk a little bit about where they're headed. So, Umesh.
Thank you, Sumant. Very nice to be here today. Umesh Sachdev, I'm founder and CEO of a company called Uniphore. I founded the company 16 years ago in 2008. We are a multimodal AI company which services thousands of enterprises around the world. Some measures, we are one of the world's largest AI companies with enterprise customers and deployments. We're headquartered in Silicon Valley. And by market capitalization, we'd become a unicorn sometime back.
That's why you're here. But let's call it Amir.
Thank you, Sumant. So my name is Amir Husain, and I'm founder and CEO of SparkCognition, which is an artificial intelligence company based in Austin, Texas. SparkCognition is actually on a somewhat of a unique mission. I was really taken up by this opportunity that global infrastructure presents. There's about $100 trillion worth of pumps, trains, automobiles, aircraft, all sorts of physical infrastructure that makes our lives go and function. And all of this infrastructure, most of it, is either in need of being built, rebuilt, or is crumbling. So what role can artificial intelligence play in revitalizing this infrastructure and deliver for us something that actually works for the people of the world, in the developed parts and in the developing parts of the world? And to do that through a series of partnerships with the world's largest industrial companies. So that was the dream. 10 years ago, I started the company as the sole founder. And today, as Sumant mentioned, we've achieved a unicorn valuation, which to me is the first step, because the market that we're tackling is a $100 trillion opportunity just in terms of installed infrastructure. So there's a long, long road ahead of us. And we've just about to begin taking the first steps.
So, maybe for the audience, Amir, talk a little bit about what you mean by infrastructure, but then let's also go back to 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And why, what was behind starting this?
Sure.
Company?
No, absolutely. So, in some sense, first the easy part, which is infrastructure. When I talk about infrastructure, I'm talking about the things that make the world go round. The infrastructure that delivers clean water, the infrastructure that guarantees electricity, that allow our industry to function, the infrastructure that makes it so that there aren't strikes in South Africa when factories shut down because they don't have clean or reliable power. I'm talking about the infrastructure that delivers on quality of life, that delivers on abundance. It's the most important thing that we as human beings over history have built and developed. And it's something that's really worth protecting. It's also something that hasn't received as much attention as we would have hoped. Now, going back to the other part, which is when I started the company, what was the motivation? Why this? Well, if you go back 10 years, most of the applications of artificial intelligence were focused on things like optimizing the click on an ad, recommending to you the next Netflix movie that you might want to watch. But my view has always been that the real value of artificial intelligence will come about once intelligent algorithms actually start to act in the physical world. When systems become intelligent, when people interacting with the infrastructure that gives them convenience in daily life, when those things become better. And that was really our mission, and we thought that this was entirely untapped because nobody was really talking about taking billions and billions of dollars of investment in infrastructure and just ripping and replacing it because it's too much money, it's too much of a capital expense. So to me, artificial intelligence was the unique solution to this problem. And ultimately, the solution to this problem leads directly to a better world, not through rhetoric, but because we deliver cleaner water at lower prices to more people, because we pollute our atmosphere at lower levels, we emit smaller amounts of carbon, we prevent environmental disasters, we keep equipment functional for longer. So these are true, real, deep goods that artificial intelligence can deliver within the context of physical infrastructure in the world.
And it's finally coming to be realized, the vision, I think.
Absolutely, Sumant, and you've been such a tremendous help to us in building this business. But the reality is today, companies like Boeing, Aramco, Shell, Siemens Energy, the US DoD, Navy, Air Force, you name it, large companies of all sizes across multiple industries are all our customers. And this was part of our vision because a guy with some code and one PowerPoint and a hope and a prayer can't tackle $100 trillion worth of infrastructure. You need partners to do that. And so we've got excellent partners in Boeing and Raytheon and Siemens Energy and many others that are helping us reach those goals because they are the owners of the infrastructure.
So turning to you, Umesh, talk a little bit about your 16-year journey, since you were like in grade school or something that you started the company, and what in that journey, when have you seen inflection points that gave rise to this opportunity?
So, 16 is a long time, Sumant. The world was, in many ways, very different than what it is today in 2008. I'm a computer science engineer by training. And you know what got us to start this company? While the scenario was very different, we're still doing the same thing. We started the company to use AI, natural language processing, speech recognition, to allow human beings to communicate better with machines. And why did we want to do that? We said, look, around the world, depending on levels of literacy or comfort with computers or technology, not everyone in the world can use the internet the same way. And that's not because of lack of connectivity, but it was because of lack of literacy or skill set to use a browser on a computer and go to the World Wide Web. So the thesis was that if we can let people interact with the internet just by speaking to it in a language of their choosing and have the internet talk back in many ways. So that gives rise to our research in speech, natural language, conversational AI, which then has become multimodal AI, combining video, voice, and text on the same platform. And today we service thousands of enterprise customers. The inflection points have been several. The most recent one was about 12, 18 months ago with this advent of generative AI. And not that the technology is new, a lot of people don't realize that 2018 was the first time Google put out a white paper on transformers, which is the underpinning of
It's about the attention.
generative AI. But the inflection point in the last 12, 18 months has been that the world started to understand, our buyers started to understand, the enterprise users, the CIOs that we sell to started to understand the power and the profoundness of this technology. And that has made doing business or growing this business very exciting.
So first of all, I think what you mentioned, and I think the audience would be pretty interested, how old is the science of AI? I thought it just was like 18 months ago. Like, when did AI start?
You want to start, Amir?
Yeah, well, AI started in the late 50s. There was a conference at Dartmouth that was organized by a number of academics across many fields. Marvin Minsky was one of the founders of the field. And really, even before that, work on neural networks had been going on since the 40s. So the idea of AI being new, it's not so new from the point of view of a few years and a few decades, but it is quite new as a new science, as a new area of
applied science.
Of applied science. Yeah. So from that point of view, I think there's been a couple of real observations as we've developed AI technology. One, that actually this can be done. Rules can get us so far, and you got expert systems out of that in the 80s. And then beyond that, neural networks, which were thought to be very limited. Marvin Minsky very famously wrote a paper saying that neural networks won't really be able to, perceptrons, won't really be able to solve tough problems. But then there were counters to that. And then neural network technology started to rise, and then the compute came about, cheap compute, and then GPUs, which were evolved to play games, just happened to have the perfect architecture to allow these massively pipelined machine learning operations. And then on top of that, you had this abundance of data because of the internet. And all of this converged, and you had the deep learning revolution, which began in the 2010s, I would say. And so since then, it's been quite a wild ride. But now what's next? So far, all of the training, most of the models have been on supervised approaches where you have labeled sets of information and you have to collect a lot of information in order for the model to understand what you're trying to get the model to discriminate on. But now there is self-supervising approaches where just being exposed to a large amount of data, models can extract from the data itself without any human intervention what it should pay attention to. Then on top of that, you've got models that can fight with each other, like generative adversarial networks, which there's one network that proposes something, the other network says, no, you're wrong. And ultimately, they develop a consensus to improve the model without human input. And with generative AI, which now goes beyond discriminative and starts to create content. So we really are in a very, very rich time in the development of artificial intelligence at a fundamental level. And of course, my business, Umesh's business, many of the businesses in March Capital's portfolio are the beneficiaries of a lot of this, and some of our are also contributors to the core capabilities that then come back and then benefit the rest of the
But
business.
eventually, all of this is to give benefit to the customers.
Of course.
And you both have achieved some sort of scale and size, you've achieved some number and valuation, but that all now means that you have the opportunity or the potential to be standalone public companies. Now, Umesh, talk a little bit about what you see your next 5 years, what you'd like to see happen in the evolution of your business. Maybe give people a little framework on the business itself, and then, and what drives you to that.
So we are at a very interesting moment in time, Sumant. Having founded this company 16 years ago, starting with one form of AI, which was speech, conversational, becoming multimodal, today servicing over 1,500 customers, 750,000 users. Like I said, in many measures, we're one of the world's largest implementers of AI within the enterprise. Service customers in 13 different industries across 20 countries, and the business is growing really well. We're approaching 170, 180 million US dollars of ARR, growing at over 80%. At the same time, the journey of AI is still in its first innings. It's still really early. So while our business is maturing, the technology space that we are working in is still at its infancy at best. And the reason I say that is because, like Amir mentioned, infrastructure, GPUs, cloud, etc., have got us here. But infrastructure itself is undergoing a lot of pivotal changes. The AI models themselves are undergoing a lot of pivotal changes. And the way enterprises or consumers are going to consume AI and change their own business, we're just at the beginning of those stages.
But at the end of the day, customers don't buy AI. Customers buy product. They pay you for something, they get some benefit of it. How do you see that evolving? For me, that's sort of the critical part of this becoming mainstream and becoming part of everything everyone does, right? Where is that in your perception of your customer's journey? Where do you see that going? And how does one think of value capture in that equation?
So, look, I'll give you real examples. We service customers in their contact centers, in their sales journeys, anything in the front office that impacts their customer. And we have customers who have tens of thousands of people working in contact centers, where AI comes in and drives up to 50% efficiency, and ultimately headcount reduction in those functions. In sales, increasing forecasting, increasing sales efficiency are use cases where large enterprises, big banks, telecom service providers are using us. What is changing is, like you said, customers are interested always in business outcomes, but now customers are interested to also know what AI platform is running those products in which business outcomes are coming. And the reason for that is that people are beginning to realize that those AI platforms are underpinned by a layer of data. And that data belongs to the enterprise. It belongs to somebody in the world. And to have preparation for upcoming regulation, to have the understanding of what data is going in for this AI model to make intelligent decisions. Are those models biased? Did something enter those models that should not have entered, and therefore, the business could come at risk because of them. And so it was okay even a year ago to have one AI model for one contact center application, another one for probably back office because I was doing some recommender systems. Now those companies are saying that I want AI platforms doing many different applications from one common layer of data. So it's becoming more of a platform issue. The final thing you spoke about public companies, by the time Uniphore goes public or Amir's SparkCognition goes public, we believe one very interesting shift will happen in the financial markets. Is that software companies have historically reported an off-balance sheet asset if they had real estate, right? If companies had big offices or big factories, that became an off-balance sheet asset in addition to other financial disclosures. We believe by the time we are going public, one off-balance sheet asset disclosure we'll be making is the size of our data lakes.
Or the amount of data you have.
The amount of data that we as an AI company possess, which is exclusive, which has aged over time, and that in itself will create value in addition to the financial metrics of the company.
Okay, we have a few minutes left, and I think maybe we open it up to the audience. This is supposed to be interactive, so. Is it on? We can hear you. I'll repeat the question.
Hi, thank you very much. Fantastic panel. I'm Tony Berkeley. I'm with FII.
Is this a permanent structure, do you think, or if they
We're the
just put it
hosts
on?
and organizers of this event, FII 7. As head of investment, I curated this innovation lab here, and very pleased that you've had this dialogue today. What you'll find here are a bunch of smaller, high-growth, highly focused companies, many of them AI-enabled, who work primarily at what you might call the application layer. So they're solving specific problems in medicine, in climate data, in the HR function for a large corporation. And we're very pleased over here to have our friends at IBM who decided to bring Watson X AI, their next generation, more general AI solution, to demo it for us, particularly to show the governance package so we can see some really concrete solutions to this issue of how we get our hands around AI and control it so it doesn't control us. So that prompts my question for you gentlemen. As you think about the landscape for AI, what's the best way for a smaller, more focused application layer company to interact with these larger language models, these more generative AI companies? How should they be thinking about this interaction strategically going forward?
Well, I'll sort of piggyback off of something that Umesh said earlier, which is that one of the sources of value for a lot of these smaller companies will be the data that they own. And I think in many ways, the open source movement, where you've got a large number of open source LLMs now being made available, and you've got open source infrastructures to train them, fine tune them, these allow smaller companies to maintain a data edge as well as a model edge, as well as a validated delivery edge, meaning the quality that those systems show. So in my view, I think that is very critical. And large companies that we work with are also quite hesitant to take their crown jewels, a company like a Boeing or a Ford that's been in business for 105 years, it's going to think twice, maybe 10 times, maybe 1,000 times before turning data over to somebody that has the expertise to turn that data into a product, because the capability is always there, intent can change very quickly.
Umesh, what do you think about this open source versus proprietary?
So this is a very nuanced subject, and we can spend hours on this, but I'll share some clip notes. If you think about where we are in the innings of AI, the world is figuring out what will governments do by way of regulation, all right? And EU is the first region in the world that's put out a draft of a regulation. It's not yet a full regulation. And it's invited, commentary from constituents. As the EU draft is written as is, if it were to become regulation overnight, not a single open source LLM model, including GPT or Llama 2, will comply. And why is that? Fundamentally, that draft is asking for those models to give credit to the owners of the content whose original data was used to train the model. If you've trained a large language model by scraping the internet, by scraping multiple websites, it's impossible for the model to explain itself and trace back to the original content provider. Whereas if you build a proprietary model, which a smaller company could do if it has access to some deep vertical knowledge of a key industry or certain customer data sets, etc., then that smaller company with a proprietary model could possess that edge in a highly regulated environment. The second issue is these models are the fundamental underpinning infrastructure to other software applications. So these models have to be combined with workflow automation or some sort of an RPA layer.
Or UI, UX.
UI, UX, etc., which once again, startups will have the agility to perform in specific industry verticals that the large open source
By the way,
model
it's
providers.
not very different from what happened with data sovereignty or what happened with people having to store data regionally where they had some control, or a big corporate saying, you can't take my data out of my own repository. I'm not going to allow you to do that. So I would say it's evolving in many ways. I will say, the first sort of question again is business model. How do you generate revenue from what you're doing? And all of these LLMs are trying to, in some way, shape, or form, disintermediate search as their first revenue model. The open LLMs. It's open source data and open LLMs trying to displace how people engage with this existing data. When you come to enterprise functions, what we found is you need specialized models, or you need a combination of specialized models and open source models trained on specialized data to deliver value. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely, 100%, 100%. There's, if you ask ChatGPT to take in some data about a seismic image and make something of it, the answer will be nothing.
Why don't you explain that
Yeah.
our one product?
Yeah,
there?
so for example, at SparkCognition, we've built the world's first foundational model that can take 1% of seismic sounding data and create an image which is as accurate as you would otherwise have in an 18-month process, and then allow an oil and gas exploration firm to drill.
This is undersea topography.
For undersea. So this is something that we're doing with Shell. Now, because it's not quite the same as a chatbot, you won't see it in the press as much unless you really follow those areas. But in terms of the economic impact of something like that, tied to unlocking energy in the dozens of billions, trillions, the impact of that kind of AI is just beyond belief. So yeah, those are things that are happening, and in these supposed narrow silos, but with impact that is seminal.
Any other questions?
We've got 1 minute.
Thank you, gentlemen. You mentioned you recently hit a $1 billion mark. What are the challenges that came with hitting that milestone in terms of building a company? What are the expectations? What are the growth challenges that you faced?
Okay. So the expectations are, for me in general, they're extremely muted at first because I'm just focused on the thing that needs to be done. I'm focused on building the thing. My background is I'm an engineer. So what I'm driven by is the thing that needs to be built has to be built, right? That's an internal compulsion. And then after that, I figure out how to take it forward. And in doing that, over time, I've become more disciplined. But I will tell you that, and I think somebody asked the Jensen Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA, at a recent conference. He said, well, now that you've built a $1 trillion company, what do you think? He said, probably I wouldn't build a company. The reason for it is that it comes across as flippant, but I can totally understand what he means. It tests everything about you. It tests your physical, mental, emotional, your backbone. You are tried in ways in which you couldn't have believed that tests exist for you to be tried in those ways. So look, that's something, and by the way, there's no exit ramp. If you work at a company, you can say, boss, I'm really, having a bad day. Here's my 2 weeks notice, I'm done. There's no bad day. I mean, there are bad days, but there's no exit. So if you're that kind of a founder, the biggest psychological hit that you get is you are here till the end. And just even knowing that is quite something. Not everyone is able to deal with that in a real visceral way. So that's a big part of it.
But on a different note, it's fun too, right, Umesh? It's not all bad and
It is fun. I wouldn't do anything else. Everything that Amir said is true. It's a roller coaster ride. And specifically to your question, look, a billion-dollar valuation or unicorn status, to me, it's a number. It's an evolution of a business. It's a great milestone, but that's what it is. It's a milestone. It's a validation. It's something that, if a startup hits that point, please celebrate with your teams. But right after you have a nice dinner or outing with your team, get back to work because it's
By the way, I'll tell you, we have a company in our portfolio that went public maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago. We thought it would be a $10 billion outcome. It ended up trading at 25. Today it's trading close to 40-some billion dollars. And you talk to the founder and he said, I think I can see a $200 billion company here in the next 5 years. $200 billion company, there's not many of them out there. But I think that's just a number. It's at some point, it doesn't matter. And, we've seen that evolution many times. My early career, we sold PayPal to eBay as one of our companies for $1.6 billion. We thought it was the world's best outcome. No one talks about that today. So it also comes and goes, very fleeting. But anyway, on that note, thank you both for joining us. Thank you for joining us, and appreciate you having us here.